Things I wish I'd known before we got married. As soon as I said it, you said, "Ooh, what's this about?" Gary Chapman's the author of that book. He's been on Huntley Street before. A lot of you have read his stuff. He's a prolific author. The 5 love languages maybe comes to mind, but he's here to talk about this new book. Gary, with all the books you've written, why did you wait till now to write this one? Why wasn't this the first one you wrote?
You know, Jim, I have wanted to write this book for a long, long, long time because I've always felt that preparation for marriage is extremely important, and that if we would give more time to preparation, we would more likely be successful in our marriages. But I've just been involved so much with couples who are struggling and going through difficulties in their marriage and tried to focus on that. I've been a counselor now for 35 years, and most of my writing is focused on married couples. But I am so excited about this book because I believe the need is so great to help young people prepare for what should be the most significant part of their life, apart from their relationship.
Yeah, you know, when I went through the table of contents before reading the book, I'm thinking, well, there you go. I mean, pretty much everything you deal with here is stuff that sooner or later a young couple has to deal with. Like, for instance, toilets are not self-cleaning. Who's going to clean the toilets, you know? Or we need a plan for handling our money. But one of the things that, well, you start off with it actually, and I think this would be a major shock for a lot of people listening to you or reading your book, and that is that falling in love is not enough for a sustainable marriage. What do you mean by that?
Well, I wish I had known that, Jim. And the reason the experience of falling in love is not an adequate foundation for marriage is it's temporary. We've studied it. It has a 2-year lifespan. That's the average. Some a little more, some a little less, but average 2 years you're in this euphoric state where you just feel like this is the most wonderful person in the world. There's nothing wrong with them. They're absolutely perfect. You know, your mother can see their flaws. She will say, "Honey, have you considered they haven't had a steady job in 5 years?" Right. But you can't see their flaws. During that stage, they're just perfect. And we think, at least I thought when I got married, this is the real thing. This is it's going to be like this forever. I mean, I've met the right woman. I've got the right feelings. She's got the right feelings. And the reality is that's not an adequate foundation because you're going to come down off the high. And then you're going to have to deal with what Mama said. Because Mama saw some things you didn't see. And we're dealing with the real person. We're back in the real world. And everyone has flaws. And now these things surface. Our conflicts arise. We don't know how to solve them. We get into arguments. And a year down the road, we're asking, why did we get married?
Yeah, well, this is the business of marriage, isn't it? I mean, everything from a budget to food to house cleaning to moods to menstrual cycles to work pressures. I mean, this is the business of relationship, and it's the business of relationship that often totally intimidates and turns young couples off.
Yeah, and I do think it's important in the midst of all of that to keep emotional love alive. And that's why one of the things I say in the book is I wish I'd known that romantic love has 2 stages. The euphoric stage, then you have to move into the more intentional stage where you learn how to communicate love to the other person in a language that they will understand. And in that chapter, I give a little overview of the 5 love languages, which has helped so many couples.
You do, and I really appreciated that because I hadn't read the 5 love languages. Give us a quick summary right now of the 5.
Well, basically, there's 5 fundamental ways to communicate love emotionally. One is words of affirmation. You look really nice in that outfit. Really appreciate what you did. Then there's acts of service, doing something for your spouse. Cooking a meal, washing dishes, mowing grass, doing something you know they would like for you to do. Then there's gifts, universal, to give gifts as an expression of love. And then quality time, giving them your undivided attention. Number 5, physical touch. We've long known the emotional power of physical touch. And the idea is that each of us has a primary love language. Very similar, Jim, to spoken language. Everyone grows up speaking a language with a dialect, okay? I grew up speaking English, Southern style, U.S., okay? Right. But everyone grows up with a language and a dialect, and that's the one they understand best. Same thing is true with love. And if you don't speak love in the language of the other person, you can be sincerely loving them, and they don't get it. And many couples miss each other because they don't get it.
When you're coaching young couples about these 5 love languages, do you give them any hints as to how to identify their future spouse's love language?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, they can go to 5lovelanguages.com. There's a free quiz that'll help them do that. But you also observe how they typically express love or appreciation to other people. Yeah. If they're always patting people on the back, physical touch is probably their language. If they're the kind of person that likes to have lunch with their friends, quality time is probably their language. So observe their behavior. Listen to their complaints. What do they complain about? The wife who says, we don't ever spend any time together, is telling you that quality time is her love language and she's not getting it from you. Right. And then also, what do they request of you most often? If they're saying to you, could you give me a back rub? They're asking for physical touch. Or could we take a walk together? They're asking for quality time. So if you put those three things together, observe their behavior, what are their complaints, and what do they request most often, you can figure out a person's love language.
My dad gave me some really good advice back when I was a kid. He started talking to me about relationships as soon as I understood that there were relationships. He talked to me about sex before I was 5 years of age, so it was never an issue in terms of my understanding of these things. But he said to me when I was about 14 or 15, he said, now Jim, he said, by the time you're about 17 or so, I said, you're going to be looking around, and he said, you're going to see girls that are pretty attractive. He said, if you can, stand back and just watch what they laugh at, who their friends are, how they dress, if you can get any indication of what their values might be. But he said, the real kicker, he said, is try to meet their mom. And he said, then imagine her mom married to me, your dad. And he said, you'll have a pretty good idea what you're looking at. Was that good advice?
That was great advice. Yeah. You know, the way I put it in the book is, I wish I'd known that the old saying, like mother, like daughter, like father, like son, is not a myth. Look at his father if you want to know what he will be like in 10 years.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
It does not.
Something that I really enjoyed because it's so critical to sustainable relationships is your chapter on forgiveness. Yeah. When you say forgiveness is not a feeling, expand on that.
Yeah. Well, you know, I wish I had known that, because I had the idea as an adult and in my marriage that forgiveness was a feeling, that they apologized, you sincerely heard the apology, and consequently you felt good about forgiving them. The reality is that forgiveness is a decision. You decide to forgive the person. You may still feel hurt. You may still feel angry, but you are choosing to forgive them. They've committed something, they've hurt you deeply, they've apologized to you, and you choose to forgive them. The model, of course, is our relationship with God. God forgives us. If we confess our sins, He's faithful and just to forgive us. So when someone apologizes, we choose to forgive them. We let it go. And when the memory comes back, and this is where many people struggle, when the memory comes back, the pain comes back, and you take it to God, and you say, Lord, you know what I'm remembering, and you know what I'm feeling again, but I thank you that's forgiven. Now help me to do something good today that will enhance this relationship. And you don't let the failures of yesterday mess up today.
With all the counseling you've done, I'm sure you've encountered this more than once. A couple sit there across your desk and they say, one of them says, now he or she has been unfaithful to me. Yeah. And I have forgiven him, but frankly, I just don't trust him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that a natural reaction, and how do you deal with that?
It is a natural reaction, and I say you're normal. Yeah. Because trust is not reborn by forgiveness. Sometimes people think forgiveness and trust are the same thing. No, no. Forgiveness opens the door to the possibility of rebuilding trust. How do we lose trust? A person is untrustworthy. You know, they broke the covenant in this case. How do you regain trust? By the person being trustworthy. So I say to a person who's been unfaithful to their spouse, and they've now confessed and turned back and are rebuilding the relationship, if you want to rebuild the trust of your spouse, what you say to them is, my cell phone is yours anytime you want to look at it. My computer is yours to look at it anytime you wish. If I tell you I'm going to see someone, you can call over there and see if I'm there. I'm through with deceit. My life is an open book. And you take that attitude and you follow through with that, they will come to trust you again. But it takes time to rebuild trust.
There's also a sense with forgiveness that if I forgive, I am endorsing bad behavior, I'm empowering dysfunction, or I'm turning a blind eye to an injustice. Yeah. And there's a great need we all have for justice. Yeah. What do you counsel couples on that score?
Well, you know, the reality is, Jim, that we are creatures made in the image of God, and God is a just God, and consequently, we do have a concern for right and for justice. But God is also merciful, and because Christ paid our penalty, He can forgive us and still be just. And because He paid the penalty for my sins and my spouse's sins, I can also forgive them and still not deny justice. I'm showing mercy rather than justice.
Yeah, mercy trumps justice, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It really does.